Okay, let's do this one together. So when we talk about pollination, I mean, what's the seed? What's pollen? And yeah, answer those two questions for me first.
Pollen pretty much contains, it's like this, it's like what's produced by the anther and contains the male gamete, and during pollination, this gets transferred to the.
What's a human equivalent of a seed? That's what I want to know. Maya, what's the human equivalent of a seed?
I'm not sure.
A zygote.
There you go. Thank you. Right. So what makes up a seed? So now I can finally annotate. Good. Right. So a seed is made up. So I drew a plant very quickly for you, right? And the only reason that you should care about plants for year 12 is their immune system is pretty cool, but otherwise you just need to know the basics of replication for a plant. Okay, it just forms your background knowledge for understanding human replication. You have a central stigma style and ovary that contains ova, which is the female sex cell, right? And you also have anthers, which are these long stalks that contain pollen, and that's the male sex cell. What's going to happen is the anther is going to move down the stigma style, and it's going to fertilize an ova, and that's going to form a zygote or a seed. Now, Micah, whenever we have gametes involved, what happens to the offspring? Are they all genetically identical, or are they all varied whenever gametes are involved?
Varied.
Good, right? And what's at the definition of, Micah, when we have a type of reproduction in which we have varied offspring? Do we call it sexual or asexual?
Sexual.
Good, sexual reproduction. So in this case, Micah, when a plant pollinates itself, right, its own pollen fertilizes its own ova, would you call that sexual or asexual reproduction?
I think it's sexual.
Why do you say it's sexual?
Because there's still like gametes involved.
Good, which means every single seed will be different to the seed before and the seed after it. And that's because the ova and the pollen are made by meiosis. And I think you all know, whenever you engage in meiosis, you make 4 different cells. Everyone with me? So even though we're talking about the same plant here, every single pollen that plant makes will be different to the next pollen. Every single ova that plant makes will be different to the next ova. So every single zygote or seed the plant makes will be different to every adjacent zygote or seed. So since we have genetic variation, we call this sexual reproduction. The learning point of this question is that self-pollination is sexual reproduction. So I've been knowing, if self-pollination is sexual reproduction, here, this plant by itself can do sexual reproduction. What's asexual reproduction for a plant? What does that refer to?
Vegetative propagation.
Very good. Good job. Right, you saved W9 today. So the answer is vegetative propagation is the mechanism of asexual reproduction in a plant. For your HSC exams, again, they're never going to ask you an example of this. In your trials, I would have told you to remember a named example of vegetative propagation. But as long as you know the general process in which we have either runners, you can have rhizomes, you can have, there's so many different variations, but basically what happens is mitosis of the shoot or root system of a plant to form an identical clone. That's vegetative propagation. It's a type of plant cloning. Yeah, good.